Okay, we're going to talk about selling. Or you guys are here for the cooking session? That's not this one. All right, cool. So my name's Pete Kazanji. You're going to have to give me a break. I was on the 5 a.m. flight from San Francisco this morning, so hopefully I'm articulate. This is a little bit smaller than anticipated, so if you guys want in the back want to like move forward a little bit, I just scooted this forward. Hopefully you guys can see. I also tweeted the slides earlier, so if you want to follow along on your personal device, you can do that as well. There's this slide deck also. The second slide has a recording of this that I did as well. So if you want to watch a recording after this because you didn't see anything, because you didn't quite get enough, you can do that too. But we're going to talk about founder-led selling today. Should probably be about 40 minutes, I want to say. I think most of the folks that are in this room are kind of like pre-Series B, I want to say. Cool. So I'm not going to focus too much on the like crazy scaling stuff because I don't want to talk about stuff that's immaterial. And then maybe we can leave some time for questions. Sound good? Party. All right. That is the recording if you want to get to it later. Also, I got my marketing team to be cool with giving away free copies of my book if you'd like that. You can just go to atriumhq.com/DSW and sign up for that. You don't have to like attend a meeting or anything. But I'll tell you a little bit more about my book here in a second. This presentation is kind of like a sister. Oh, sorry. There's the URL. But again, present on the slides that I just tweeted. I'm the only Peter Kazanji on the internet. So if you just search for Peter Kazanji space Twitter, top result. All right, who am I? My name's Pete. A little bit of background for you. I started out my kind of technology career as a product marketing and product management, kind of like business generalist at VMware way back in the day. My first software company was a company called TalentBin, started in 2010. It was acquired by Monster Worldwide in late 2013. That's really where I went from being like a business generalist founder to sales leader. And mainly the reason why was because when we started making TalentBin, the software as a recruiting search tool, we quickly figured out that software doesn't sell itself, and so someone needed to sell it, and that someone was me. So I was our first rep, first sales manager, our first quote-unquote VP of sales. When we were acquired by Monster, we had 20 sales reps, 20 customer success folks acquired by Monster, and then I was responsible for new product sales there. Monster kind of had like a roll-up like acquisition strategy, so they always had like a bajillion different products, so that was kind of chaos. Was there for about 18 months, and then left. Wrote a book on startup sales called Founding Sales, and then now I'm one of the founders of a data-driven sales management software company called Atrium. It's software that helps sales organizations use metrics to improve the performance of their reps. It's like Moneyball for sales organizations. And I started the nation's largest sales operations and leadership community. It's called Modern Sales Pros. So that's a little bit on me. That's like my bona fide slide. Like, okay, I kind of know what I'm talking about on this stuff. So hopefully it's worthwhile for you guys. Yeah, as noted, I started my career in product marketing and product management at VMware. Worked on these like small shitty products within VMware. So VMware Fusion, VMware Workstation, very small revenue, which was kind of nice because they were kind of like startups within VMware. Like VMware had like a world-killing enterprise business, and so we got to kind of like goof off doing fun consumery product marketing and kind of marketing stuff over there. Started TalentBin, acquired by Monster from 2014 to 2018 when I was kind of hanging out there, and then wrote Founding Sales. Again, if you want to get a free copy, you're welcome to do so. Cool. So what we're going to be talking about today is like sales maturity stages of your prototypical B2B software company. And the intended audience for this is founders. And the reason why is the case that I'm going to advance to you all, and this is advanced in my book, is that you as the founder you're the one who has to be the initial seller, because trying to get somebody else to do it for you never works out. We're kind of going to get into that a little bit more. And so one of the things, I think this is less so recently, but a lot of times founders kind of because they come from a technical background or product background or what have you, have a lot of kind of misconceptions around sales. And so unfortunately the response to that is oftentimes like, sales, ew. Like, ew, I'm gonna avoid that, which is really unfortunate because it's a great way of killing your company. And so these are some of the kind of anti-patterns that oftentimes they're what I like to call seductive yet crappy anti-patterns. Like, hey, yeah, we just like publish the documentation and they just buy, right? So like Twilio, Stripe, Square, those kind of be examples of like people might think about those organizations and say like, yeah, it just sells itself, right? Or we don't have salespeople. Slack, Dropbox, Palantir, Atlassian. If you look under the covers, it's like total bullshit. All those organizations have tons and tons and tons of salespeople. I mean, even early on they did. I need to update these screenshots. They're kind of old, but you can see like these are LinkedIn search. At this point, Twilio has like hundreds of salespeople. But these organizations very early on had lots of salespeople, whether that was like actually they had actual salespeople or just people that were salespeople with like different names. Oh yeah, we do growth. We do business development. So don't believe it. Right? These organizations are very successful because they have salespeople. Some other kind of seductive anti-patterns would be, hey, let's get someone else to do it. I call it sprinkle some sales on it. Right? Like, oh, let's just like hire a sales rep or a sales leader. Again, usually a exited VP of sales in about 12 months. And another pretty crappy anti-pattern is selling to people who don't have your need because then you buy from them as well. This is sometimes shows up in startup accelerators. Don't do that. They're just going to churn out anyway, and you're not going to learn whether or not you're delivering value to folks. And so the question is like, well, okay, well, where does this disconnect come from for founders, and why they might not be, why they might have that sales attitude? And I think if you think about where founders come from, they typically come from an engineering, product, maybe consulting, business school background. The skills that they have are things like market identification, product opportunity, technical skills, figuring out how to fit technology to a problem in a way that's going to uniquely solve it or like solve it in a novel fashion. What you're not necessarily used to is having many parallel conversations, engaging with like lots of new people that you've never met before, and just having lots and lots of proactivity. The good news is those skills can be learned. They're just muscles to be learned or built. And then conversely, if you think about where sellers come from, oftentimes they have a business or a liberal arts background, come from an apprenticeship model. But the skills that they have would be things like communication, persuasion. When I say multiplexing, it's talking to lots of people, holding lots of conversations in their head at once, high activity, extroversion, persistence, etc. And the things that usually the skills that are absent there would be things like, systems thinking, process thinking, a lot of these skills right here. It's kind of like a yin and yang situation. And so the reason why hiring this person to figure out your initial go-to-market is the wrong design pattern is because these skills, right? It's like these skills right here, these ones right here are a lot harder to learn and are going to take a lot longer than you as a founder getting these skills right here. And so there's all sorts of unfortunate implications associated with this. This is a lovely Twitter exchange I had, I don't know, like 6 years ago or what have you, where I think like Naval Ravikant from AngelList had tweeted something along the lines of like, if you use cold email to try to get meetings, like, I don't know, like jump off a building or something like that. He was obviously like anger tweeting about somebody who ended up in his inbox. And then this founder responded to him was like, oh my God, like, plus 100, of course. And it was kind of ridiculous because this guy's solution was an SMB. It was like this company called Cover. It was an SMB facing product to just help like restaurants be able to for people to be able to check out without having without actually like talking to the waiter or what have you. Interesting idea. It was like kind of along the time when like Uber was taking off and DoorDash, or Uber and Lyft were taking off, and like, you know, the magical experience of not having to check out. The problem is like, how are you going to get in touch with like tens and tens of thousands of restaurants? Are they going to like come to you? No way, right? Like you got to go out and find them. And so if you look at these like successful sales organizations that have scaled up businesses, I mean, again, I need to update these slides, but like whether you're talking about Grubhub, Yelp, DoorDash, any of the like Toast, they all have massive sales organizations. And so like this is like a case study or a microcosm of like the negative implications associated with like the sales you mindset. We're actually going to skip that one really quickly. And so you can understand where founders maybe, because a lot of founders don't have experience with sales other than in the movies, you can understand why people maybe have this mindset. But I think an important thing to recognize is that sales has actually changed substantially in the last like 20 or 30 years, where there were some kind of negative, I don't know, characteristics associated with selling 30 years in the past, 40 years in the past, that a lot of sales technology have helped remediate, where sales was about these things right here. So, you know, always be closing, charismatic, you know, maybe not collaborative. And sales still has a lot of that going on, but now what I like to say is that effective sales is a very effective seller is like a consultant who happens to have a particular predilection for a specific solution, right? Like yours, which isn't to say that they're actually going to try to shove like round pegs in square holes, because that's terrible, especially in a SaaS environment. They're just going to churn. They're not going to get value. They're just going to churn out anyway. But if you kind of use that mindset, you can understand that salespeople and then you as a founder who are doing this initial selling, you're really kind of the tip of the spear in the like microeconomic innovation, right? Like you are literally how new innovation gets to market, because people are not going to go and look for these solutions on their own. And so what we're going to talk about, so that's like my sermon on why you should care about this. And then now we're going to talk about the design pattern that you should use to go about this. Great. So the first thing you have to do is wrap your mind around the fact that with startups, smooth value creation, so the x-axis there is time, the y-axis is enterprise value. Smooth value creation over time does not happen in startups. It is not a straight line at all. And this is kind of borrowed from Eric Ries. Who's read The Lean Startup? Yeah, like startups are not small, big companies, right? And so this is kind of like the go-to-market implication of that. And you can understand why people might think this, like, oh yeah, like enterprise value goes like this. Well, that's Salesforce and NetSuite. Again, I need to update these screenshots. Instead, like we're way down at the origin. Like zoom in, and it actually looks like this. Step functions. And so I like to call these business motion inflection points. But the idea here is that you are dealing with a specific problem that you're seeking to solve within your organization. And then after you solve that and unlock it, there's an unlock that has happened, and your organization is more valuable because it now does a better job at converting customer value into revenue. And so these are kind of the steps there. So the first step would be, do we know what problem we're solving? No, we don't. Uh-oh, I think we know what we should work on right now. Figuring out what problem we're solving. Grind. We then know what the problem is that we're solving. Okay, great. Does it work? No, it doesn't. It's like terrible broken software in beta. Not even in beta, right? It's a terrible MVP. Okay, cool. It doesn't work. Grind. And so these are the steps that you want to go through. And importantly, jumping to a further step without having solved an earlier step is not good. Like, will lots of people pay for this thing that does not actually work? That seems like that might be a problem. Cool. So these are the steps there. Do we know what problem we're solving? Does it work? Will someone pay? Will many people pay? Can non-founders sell this? Can we build a mini sales team? Can we max out a small sales organization? And so we're going to go through a series of these different steps, and we're going to talk about the entry criteria and the exit criteria associated with those stages. One thing that's kind of nifty about this is that not all steps are created equal. And so at later stages, once you've solved these earlier stages, at later stages, you can unlock even more value because what you are enabling is parallelization of your business motion. So a good example of that is as soon as you can figure out how non-founders can sell this, well, how many founders are there in a startup? I don't know, 1, 2, maybe like one business founder. How many non-founders are there in the market that we could hire to sell this? I don't know, tens of thousands, lots of salespeople, right? So we can potentially parallelize things pretty well. Cool. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the entry criteria and the exit criteria for these different stages. First, what problem are we solving? This is this is traditionally known as customer development. The goal here is we're seeking to discover and validate the pain points in the market that can be solved with a unique application of technology, and then build it. And so then the things that we would do here, notice this is not really sales, this is research, right? We engage potential customers that have this hypothesized pain point. It's a hypothesis. Maybe they don't have the pain point, and we learn that, and that's actually a really important thing. That's okay before spending a bunch of expensive engineering resources in building something for a pain point that doesn't exist. Figuring out how they solve it right now, how painful it is that it's unsolved. Ideally, these are interviews. We recorded this. It was super janky. I would run like Camtasia on my machine while like sitting next to somebody. We transcribe them, survey people for potential features to build. These should be done by, ideally the business and tech founders. Later on, you can kind of abstract that out where like the technology folks are working on the technology and the commercial folks are working on the commercial stuff. The exit criteria here would be, you're going to get to a point where you have like a statistically significant count of folks where you're starting to hear these patterns. You're like, okay, cool. Like, it sounds like this cluster of like these genre of potential customers right here have these problems, and and their problems are really high, like of high magnitude, because the existing solution doesn't, or like the existing solutions in the market don't solve their problem. That seems like there's a market opportunity right there. We're going to go after that one. That's ideally what you should see. So probably that's not a dozen, it's probably dozens. We kind of went a little ham on this with Atrium and did 150 customer interviews in the first half of 2016. And we were very fussy about it. We had a whole persona matrix. So we were validating that organizations do a poor job of using data and metrics to measure and improve their sales organization. So we talked to sales leaders, sales operations folks, CFOs, CEOs. We talked to organizations of size between 5 to 20 sellers, 20 to 100, and 500 up. And then we had a whole matrix associated with it to make sure that we were checking off the ones that we wanted to talk to. That's maybe a little overkill. But we wanted to make sure that we weren't going to be building in the wrong direction. Cool. So even though this doesn't look like an org chart, this is an org chart. It will look more like an org chart later. The person who is doing this work, like the lead gen and the interviewing and documentation, is usually the business founder in this sort of situation. These are some great resources for that. Get in the Van by Mike Ilsipi, Lean Startup, and then Startup Owner's Manual by Steve Blank. That's actually a hyperlink to the customer interview deck that we used at Atrium to do those 150 customer interviews. Cool. So that's step one, customer development. Then the next thing is okay, well, does this actually work? And what we're seeking to do here, ideally in an alpha situation, is prove that your solution actually improves the business KPIs that you set out to prove. You had a hypothesis that, I don't know, use Atrium as an example. Hey, you measure your sales organization poorly because you do it by gut and by feel, and you really should be using metrics to instrument and improve the performance of your team. By the way, if you do that, you will have a raise in win rates or activity or fill in the blank in your sales organization. That would be the proof that applying this technology, Atrium, has created business value for your organization, right? That's the thing that we'd be seeking to prove there. So think about like what the equivalent would be for your company. What are the business KPIs you would hit and improve? And so then the mechanisms by which we would do this, ideally what we've done, this is kind of fun, is when you do these interviews, this is kind of lead gen for later on. So if you do these interviews, and people are way more down to take an interview than to like take a sales call, because I'm just an entrepreneur. I'm just trying to learn here. I'd love to talk with you because like, you're so smart and experienced. Well, then we come back to them. Hey, remember how we talked about that thing 9 months ago? And you said you had all these pain points and they were unsolved. Can we talk a little bit about like how we're approaching that? So elicitation of a dozen or so beta customers there. They might be paid, they might be unpaid. You want to make sure that they have skin in the game. Making sure that you're doing a good job of onboarding them and implementing them, like really, really getting your hands dirty and being desk side with them, because that's where you're going to figure out everything that's broken with your product, which is going to be a lot. And then instrumentation and validation of that value capture. Like, oh, look, your win rates went up, your bookings went up, or, oh, look, you got this many more leads to your restaurant, or you're able to turn over your restaurant tables this much more quickly because of quick checkout or fill in the blank. Isn't that great? Right? What would the value associated with that be? Again, the person who's doing this is the founder. The exit criteria here would be, because what we're doing here is we're collecting the proof that's going to allow us to then exchange money for this value later on to the thousands and thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of folks out in the market that have this problem that we identified. And so what we're really seeking to do is capture down this proof that your solution positively impacts those KPIs. The anti-pattern here, and I guess I skipped anti-patterns over here. It's important to talk about the anti-patterns. The anti-pattern here would be like hiring a salesperson to try to figure this out for you. This is exactly where that would go very, very, very poorly. The anti-pattern back here is building without talking to customers. I have this problem. I should just start building it. That's why there are 5,000 note-taking tools on the App Store or to-do lists. But Asana does it wrong. Okay. So again, org chart. Still a business founder doing this. These are some resources. A bunch of these are like either articles from first round review or chapters of my book. My book is also available online, like in hypertext. You just like sign in. It's not open source. It's not like it's free as in beer. It's not free as in whatever the other part is. Free as in freedom. Cool. So then the next step here is we want to now prove that someone will pay. Someone or anyone will pay. And what we want to do is we want to prove that we can give a customer whatever that value was that we set out to create through our unique application of technology, and get money in exchange for that. And then importantly, they keep giving us money for that. It's not like we can convince them once and they're like, actually this sucks. I'm gonna stop giving you money in exchange for this value. And so the kind of the key activities there is like the presentation of an ROI, a return on investment case to the customers. Like they validate it. They're like, yeah, you know what? If you're able to bring me that many, diners in an evening, because my average check size is $200 and I make $50 a margin off of that. If you're able to bring me that, I would be totally down to pay you this amount. Totally down to do that. And then we transact and we do that. So the tools that you would be using in order to do that would be pricing with that ROI rationale. This is where you might like develop your pricing here. And then also now what you're starting to do is you're figuring out how to talk about the thing that you're selling. So a sales narrative, it's product marketing land, but call it a sales narrative. Maybe an early sales deck that is like the pictures and words version of that narrative. Maybe it's a demo, also an implementation process. So we're not just like, here's the software, have fun, figure it out. And again, this would be largely being done by the business founder. The exit criteria here is you want a small set of customers paying money in exchange for the solution. but importantly, capturing value. And this can be a problem. Like that would be an anti-pattern there. It's not the primary anti-pattern. The primary anti-pattern is like being afraid of asking for money in exchange for your solution. So should bias against that one because it's the thing that's the most uncomfortable, and so people are most prone to not do it. The secondary anti-pattern is selling the solution but not ensuring that the customer gets the success. So it's astronomically important that, especially in a subscription environment, which is pretty much everyone, subscription or usage environment, usage pricing environment. Same org chart. Cool. Well, many people pay for this. Wait a minute. Isn't that the same stage as this? No, not really. This is the initial transaction, initial set of transactions. But then what you're going to do once you've kind of proven that at the very, very small scale, now what you want to do is you want to run that cycle a good number of times, because what you're going to start doing is like catching the sharp edges around the corner. And really what you're doing is you're running the play again and again and again and again in order to build the assets and mechanisms that you're going to use, not for yourself, but for all those incremental salespeople, right? And so you are being your own internal customer during this process. The analog I like to say is like you're running your the software that you've developed like locally, like your sales software, you're running it locally and like debugging, because then what we're going to do is we're going to push it to other machines to run. And so before we push it to the other machines to run, like want to make sure that it runs well. One of the things you might do, this is where we start having abstraction. A thing that you can consider, because if we're parallelizing this in you might look for leverage on lead generation. Can I get help in filling my calendar to have more of these conversations? So rather than the single person, the founder doing the lead generation and the selling and successing, you might abstract the first part off and get a sales development rep, or outsource sales development, or maybe you're just kind of clever about marketing automation. But the point is that abstract this out, and then the business founders continue to do this here. There's another pattern there where you can flip it around the other way. This is the way that I actually did it. So this is how I did it at TalentBin. This is how I did it at Atrium. The reason why I was able to do it this way at Atrium is because I'm pretty well networked. We sell to sales organizations, and I'm pretty well networked with sales leaders and sales operations folks. So I'm a pretty good SDR for myself. But what I was able to do is hire a CSM to take the success off my plate. The point is like just a little bit of abstraction can give you leverage on doing more of these cycles faster. Cool. So what are the actual things that are going to be happening in there? Again, we're refining and documenting here, right? How you would do that is a couple dozen at-bats, right? A couple dozen times through the funnel there. So these are non-beta prospects, non-friendlies, because again, we're trying to figure out like the path through the market whereby we can engage these non-friendly parties and turn them into customers, right? The tools here would be, ideal customer profile, honing in on exactly what the characteristics would be of like a really sick customer that looks, sick prospect, like, ooh man, you look perfect for us. And our ability to find hundreds and hundreds and thousands of them, messaging, qualification criteria, email outreach materials, deck, demo and prezo script. So maybe in the prior situation, the demo and prezo script was in your head. Now it's actually on paper. Sorry, Google Docs, Notion, fill in the blank. Why? Because we're getting it out of our head and we're getting it turned into documentation so another human being can pick it up. Cool. So exit criteria here is when you've gotten to a couple dozen customers there with a clear, repeatable, documented sales motion. Because then what we're going to do is because then we know it's packaged and it's ready for someone else to pick it up. Anti-pattern here would be, again, trying to get somebody else to do this for you, hiring a sales guy or gal, even worse, a VP of sales who's maybe like not used to, hasn't done work in a while, or like, hasn't done direct selling in a while. Yeah, and acquiring a bunch of customers and only a fraction of which gets a success. Leaky bucket, don't want that. This is where the fun starts. Can non-founders sell this? So what we're doing now is we're proving abstraction, where we still have our little sales development rep helper here. We've got our business founder, we'll call him Pete, still selling, but importantly now we have 2 account executives. We have 2 people that we're gonna put this sales software in their brain and have them run it to the point where we have success with them. And so what's interesting here is that the purpose of this stage right here, yes, if you were successful at it, you will be adding revenue and you'll be adding ARR to your business, what have you, but that's kind of like not the point. The point is that we really, really, really need to prove that someone who is not you and has like your special subject matter expertise can sell this. Like this is the most important thing, is proving that someone who's not you can sell this successfully. Yes, the revenue is lovely on top of that, but like really the thing that we're trying to prove here is that someone else besides you can do this. And so as a result, that should direct your efforts. And so you shouldn't be thinking about like, oh, we're like selling more. It's like, no. My job is to get these 2 folks to, and it's generally speaking, it's a good rule of thumb to have 2. My job is to hire them, get them to success, hire them, onboard them, train them, manage them, ride along with them, get them to success. And because without proving this, without unlocking this, we can't really go anywhere else. Like if we can't get 2 people to success, we can't get 8 people to success. If we can't get 8 people to success, we can't get 5,000 500 sellers to success. And then if you can't do that, you're never going to be Datadog, right? So that's the goal right here. And so the tools that you're using there would be all the like materials and tooling from previous, and you'll kind of find bugs in them, and like you're going to want to be refining them and updating them. But then the other thing now is we're starting to think about what our ideal seller profile is, right? Because this is a hypothesis that these 2 people can help us sell. And if it turns out that like, wow, I'll use Atrium as an example. Atrium is not the most simplistic software to sell in the world because it's like sales math software, even though it automates a bunch of the sales math. Like it turns out that most people hate math. So even if you make it a lot easier, it's still a little bit of a complicated sale. So our sellers have to be pretty analytical, pretty thoughtful. Like, they can't have just like fallen off the turnip truck the other day. And so that was an important realization when initially hiring, was that like, yeah, we need smarties to work on this hiring process, onboarding process, et cetera. And so the person who's doing this is the business generalist founder, who's now in this role of like a player coach situation. You want to hire 1 or 2 account executives, onboard them, get them to success. The exit criteria here is that those incremental reps are selling at least-ish as efficiently as the founder was. Like their win rates could be a little bit lower. It's always tough. Like as a founder, your subject matter expertise is going to be bananas as compared to reps that you're hiring. The other thing too is you're always going to have a little bit of that like founder aura, right? To like take meeting, or like people will take meetings with you, they'll like listen to you, etc. They don't realize that you spend most of your time like cleaning the toilet at the office or what have you, but like, oh, they're the founder. But so even if the sellers are a little bit less efficient than the founder, that's okay, because they're going to be spending 100% of their time selling, whereas maybe you're spending like 50% of your time selling. But that ideally what you would have is AEs who are selling as measured by win rate similarly efficiently to the founder there. The anti-pattern here is kind of hard to define because, as noted, it's kind of like a Goldilocks situation. The worst anti-pattern here is just hiring too many, because really what we need to do is we want to bring these folks on and get them to success, and that takes like TLC and care and feeding. And so if you have 4 reps that are in ramp, or 8 reps that you're hiring, I mean, like, imagine all the coaching that would be required in order to get a rep to success, and now split that across 8 people concurrently. Like, whew. We'll do that later, but not to start, right? And so essentially, yeah, like you don't want to overscale to start. The second anti-pattern is less common, is like non-leverage, where, actually I have seen a couple companies that I work with do this, where the founder is just like so good at selling. They're just like, oh yeah, I don't have time to hire more reps. I'm just like so good at selling. It's like, cool. That's like not your job. Your job is to your job is to unlock scalability here. That's a less common pattern. Be a good problem to have. Oh my gosh, my win rates are like 50%. People just keep throwing money at me. All right, great. Hire 5 reps and get them to a 50% win rate. Cool. So before we kind of get into like the next stage, and remember how we were saying that like this is a really important unlock here, because now if we get to success here, there's lots of salespeople in the market that we can go hire and have them sell our solution. We'll just like talk a little bit on this concept of like what scaling actually is, to kind of help, because people like throw the word around. Oh yeah, we're scaling, right? What does that actually even mean? And so the way to kind of think about this as relates to sales organizations is, this is what the ramp of a rep might look like here. And so this y-axis right here is monthly net cash flow. This is like a prototypical example. This x-axis here is time. And so the thing that happens here, so this is like an example of a rep who maybe costs us $150K a year, should be doing $60K in bookings a month, a 45-day deal cycle, 15K ACV. That's like a fairly prototypical, that's like the physics of a fairly prototypical mid-market sales motion. Great. So when you hire that person at day 1, they are not closing anything at all, right? They're costing you money. They're upside down. And you're onboarding them, you're training them. Maybe in the beginning of month 2, they're starting to take some first meetings. They're probably doing a really shitty job of those first meetings, so they're going to close lost immediately. So their efficiency is not great. But eventually, like, they start getting to more success, and at a certain point, they start bringing in bookings at a rate that defrays their costs. And then the magical thing about salespeople happen, where they start bringing in way more bookings than they cost. And so generally what you want to see is like a ratio of 3x, 4x, 5x the cost of a seller to what they're doing on a monthly or quarterly or annual basis there. It's the cost of sales. Okay, so that's like this idea here is this like cost ramp here. And then what ends up happening is then they get to success, they're steady state, they're booking a lot of stuff. Like, unfortunately, they don't go up and up and up and up because they just cap out, right? You can only have 15 customer-facing meetings in a week, or 20 customer-facing meetings in the week. Like, unfortunately, an individual sales rep cannot sell infinity of your solution, which is why we need to scale out. So now imagine this concept right here, but instead of it being a single human, it's 4 humans. Right, so again, the initial hit that we're going to be taking is 60K. We're upside down. We hired 4 reps. We're burning 60K a month on them. We're getting them to success. It flips. And so now, on a monthly basis, they're throwing off 180K of ARR, ideally. Reality intervenes often. So then, okay, that's neat. What do we do next? Do it again. we add another cohort of reps, right? So here's this right here. All right, we got them to success right around here at month whatever. Let's add another cohort of reps. Bonk, right? Inefficient reps, now costing us money, not delivering bookings yet, but because we did such a good job of figuring out how to train and onboard our reps and get them to success in the prior stage, we now know that we can do this reliably. So we're not afraid of the fact that these folks aren't closing any business, because we know that we're just going to do the same thing here. And then just keep doing it, right? Cohort 1, cohort 2, cohort 3, cohort 4, cohort 5, dunk, 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 dunk. And this is scaling. And that's what it looks like when you zoom out. So one thing to kind of comment on here before we get to the next kind of stages is why it's so important to make sure that you're ramping your reps successfully. And so I'll give you the math-based version of this. So imagine instead of this, right? In this case, right here, we get to break even on this rep at month 3, and then we get to full productivity at month 5. Well, what if instead we get to break even at 5 and full productivity at, I don't know, whatever that is, 8, 9, 8. Okay. So imagine that instead. The mechanism, the reason why, or the root cause associated with this is because we brought them on, we gave them their laptop, and we said, have fun. And it took a long time for them to kind of figure it out on their own versus really being onboarded and trained, or maybe actually you didn't have your sales deck well documented. The messaging was in your head. It wasn't in a nice Notion doc, et cetera. Fill in the blank. Whatever it was, you screwed up. And so now this is what this ramp looks like. Okay, well, now imagine that again, times 4. Now imagine that with the incremental cohorts. Essentially what your scale up is going to look like, it's going to look like this versus this. Which one do you want yours to be? This one, right? So that's just a little sermon on why it's really, really important to get people to success. And another reason why having your materials and all these things tight ahead of time for yourself, and then for those initial set of reps, is a precondition to bringing on many more people, because that's the ramification of not having done that. Cool. So next, now that we've successfully done this, now we're going to make a mini sales team. And this is where things kind of get fun. So this is where the business founder gets out of the business of selling. And instead, what you're purely managing, this little unit of revenue production here, this is the thing that we're going to be then stamping out going forward. And so we just want to make sure that it's successful to start. We want to prove the performance of this by itself, not with our involvement, with our managerial involvement, but not us selling and closing business ourselves. Because then what we're going to do is going to stamp them out. Because then we're going to go to this. And so what you'll notice is that all this is we just tripled up this right here. But the cool thing is that we knew that this one was successful here because this unit was reliably producing revenue, and customers were going to customer success and having success. So when we added 2 more of those, it should really just be the same situation. And the problem we have to solve is just making sure that it's sufficiently fed from a lead generation standpoint. And of course, there's always going to be things that break when you scale up a little bit like that. This is the reason why we're tripling up here and not adding 6 of these, because anytime you lever up a little bit like that, there's always going to be things that break around the edges. And so that's really the things that you're going to be focusing on here, you'll notice that the person at the top of the org chart here might still be the business founder. Probably this is the point at which you would bring in a professionalized sales manager there. You might do that in the stage before, generally more comfortable in this stage right here. You might also add sales operations to the mix here. But what's happening here, though, is now we're proving the performance of a team of teams. Like, this is the beginning of a machine. And so what we care about here is like the functioning of this system versus, because we already successfully proved the execution of a single AE 2 stages ago, and then a unit of revenue production 1 stage ago. And so now what we're doing is we're proving the performance, or proving the success of this team. And then you go really big, right? Cool. So that's founder-led selling. Questions? Yeah. Totally. In case you didn't hear, fundraising is a pain in the ass and takes up a bunch of your time. And if you're here, if you're here and you're fundraising, perhaps, and you're cratering your, you're taking out one of your account executives here, it can be pretty disruptive. I think the response to that is one, if you can fundraise ahead of time, and this presentation is not on fundraising strategy, but if you are raise seed funding as an example, ideally what that should do, and anytime you're fundraising, you should be thinking about like, what are the exit milestones that I'm trying to get to? So for instance, if you're fundraising for your seed, ideally what you're doing is getting enough capital to like last you through some of the, like, if you can last you through to here, right? And like the founder is not involved in day-to-day selling, then that probably shouldn't have necessarily negative impacts on revenue production. If not, and you're back here, which might be the case, right? Either here or maybe here. There's a good answer here, which is what funders are going to look at is when they're making an assessment of a business that is at this stage, is they're going to want to see that these account executives are successfully, at least if they're sophisticated, that these account executives are successfully selling, because like that's what they care about. They care about, like, they're investing in this right here. So if you can show them this right here, oh, why did your revenue growth go down? Because I'm sitting here talking to you. But the good news is there are these 2 other folks back at the office, and here, let's just like bring up Atrium really quickly, and we'll look at their win rate and how many customer-facing meetings and their bookings. And so you can imagine a future where I take your capital and I hire 10 more of these people. Can you imagine what that looks like? In fact, actually, there was this guy, Pete, and he gave this presentation. Again, it's going to look like this. So that's another way that you can address that. Unfortunately, it's like there's no easy answer to that. It's always going to be a pain in the ass. Hi. Okay. Yep. Kind of like this. Like the sellers are doing success as well. Is that right? Okay. That's a good question. So the gentleman's asking, how do you abstract like the successing by these sellers right here? So like this thing right here, because we would like them to be spending all of their 40 hours or 50 hours a week, like having first meetings with customers. I think the answer to that is documentation, right? Like what is generally the answer to all these things are going to be like documentation systems, slides, checklists, putting things that are in people's brains into a CRM and a checklist and what have you. But yes, I think that that's the ideal, of course, is abstraction there. Not always, because there are some situations wherein like the way that your business motion works really doesn't lend itself to abstraction here. I think most famously recently, Frank Slootman, the CEO of Snowflake, in his book Amp It Up, talks about the fact that he came into Snowflake and like blew up the customer success team and made it such that the account executives had to do ongoing success and kind of behave like an account management model. Kind of makes a little bit more sense in a usage-based model. So like it doesn't always make sense to have abstraction here. However, in a traditional SaaS situation where you like sell a year contract or 2-year contract, it's like, all right, cool, off to customer success. It is a good thing to desire to do, and the answer is going to be like just making sure that you're declaring the steps that need to happen and not in people's brains. Yeah, I mean, like your service people could be less expensive, and then moreover, it's more about just like specialization and leverage, because you just want your account executives having as many, first customer meetings a week versus like answering someone emails them, it's like, oh, my password's broken or whatever. It's just like, oh, cool, let me jump on that, versus like having this meeting with a new customer. Yeah. So the gentleman's asking about abstraction. So specialization, so sales development versus account executives versus customer success, and then specifically as relates to B2B versus B2C. I think actually the second part of your question is well posed, which is it all really comes down to, so the purpose of specialization and abstraction here is such that you don't have like, you can get labor arbitrage, where a junior sales development rep who costs you, $50,000 a year, $60,000 a year, et cetera, to do prospecting, is cheaper than taking the, let's say you have a mid-market account executive who costs you $150K a year. That's a $75 hourly. Saying, hey, I'm gonna pay you $75 an hour to prospect Mr. or Ms. mid-market AE, and do meetings and close, et cetera, versus just like, actually, how about instead we can get someone who costs $30 an hour to do that prospecting for us. So that's like the labor arbitrage model there. And then there's like the specialization piece as well, which is don't like lose throughput through context switching. So that's why this model works and is desirable. And actually the key enabling technology of this is actually a CRM, a database. So the reason why you had full stack salespeople back in the day was because like this thing right here was their CRM, and like all like customer state lived in their brain. And so as soon as you could declare that in a CRM and like the state of a prospect versus an opportunity versus a customer or what have you, now all of a sudden you could have multiple people working on it. Cool. So that's like the conceptual basis there. In like higher velocity, it's probably going to be harder. So places where this doesn't work, higher velocity, it's going to be harder. Yelp doesn't have SDRs because like, what am I going to do? Like call into a restaurant, I get the manager. I'm like, okay, cool. I'm glad I got you right now between shifts. Can we schedule time in a week for you to talk to my account executive? Click. Right? That doesn't work. So full stack situations will be things where it's like a high velocity sales motion where it doesn't make sense to have that offset. Where it's a low cost sale. So like Yelp is a good example of that, DoorDash, Postmates, anything like that, where it's a non-sophisticated sale where there isn't really an opportunity for that labor arbitrage where you can, your inside sales rep maybe isn't $80,000 on target or $90,000 on target, so you don't really have the opportunity for abstraction. So those are the things to consider there. Hi. how would you map the marketing org chart to this? Ooh, not sure. Yeah, geez. I mean, I think so David Sachs has a good blog post on like reference architecture org charts at different stages. I would recommend folks check that out. I don't know if it goes all the way down to seed. If it doesn't, just file a ticket against them on Twitter. Be like, hey, you need to extend this blog post. So I think in general, I mean, yeah, actually that's a good feature request for this for this presentation. But I think like here, there is no marketing. Here there might be a marketer. Here there's probably a VP of marketing and maybe like a marketing manager or two. Kind of feels like it. I mean, it's what our company looks like, right, Todd? This is Atrium's VP of Engineering, Todd. He came here to support me. Other questions? Hi. So the question is, how is this different for like professional services, consultancies, etc.? Not sure. Those have a tendency to be like kind of relationship sales. They really don't lend themselves to abstraction, especially consultancies, because it's like relationship based. Oftentimes there's incremental statements of work. It's more like an AM model. Yeah, I mean, this design pattern right here is like, SaaS direct sales situation. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, totally. No, totally not. So what the gentleman is asking is that he was talking about this pattern right here, where like early on, I had, had a network, and this isn't like 5 minutes. This isn't like special me or whatever. This is like fairly common with founders, like they're, involved in this space. Yeah, this is why when you get here, notice that there is a dedicated human there. Yeah, that's never going to scale. Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah. Yeah, and so the question is like, how do you involve product and how do you involve product in the sales motion? I think like to start, generally this like business founder will frequently be your head of product, right? So there isn't really a lot of abstraction going on there. Then as you get larger, how do you involve product in the sales process? And I think the response to that is like they're probably not involved in the sales process, but it needs to throw off information into the product process. This is why call recording software like Chorus and Gong and what have you are really helpful. But then also just like doing a good job of having like cadenced information sharing. Like at this point, we do a lot of like our customer success people file product requests and they like, file different, we have all sorts of like different tickets that ticket concepts in Salesforce for that. But like we're much larger. How big is our engineering team? 8 engineers, I want to say, something like that. What's that? Oh, 12, 50% more. Yay. Small burn rate. Yeah, like to start, like bringing those folks along is all well and good, but like there's opportunity costs of them like not being in front of a keyboard, and that kind of sucks. So just thinking about mechanisms by which you can feed that information back to folks either in a refined way or like an asynchronous way. Recordings are helpful there, etc. All right, we got 2 minutes. Last question. No one wants to take the last cookie? Okay, cool. Well, thanks for coming out, folks. As I noted earlier, if you just Google Pete Kazanji space Twitter, I will be at the top there, and this deck will be the most recent tweet that I have tweeted until I say something obnoxious later on. And if you'd like to get a copy of Founding Sales, you're welcome to do so. Just go to atriumhq.com/DSW and drop your details there. Okay, thanks.